Playing Anthony at the Royal National Theatre, not a happy experience by all accounts.
I've actually never talked about that, and
no, everybody seems to talk about it on your behalf.
Indeed, they do, and like a lot of things where you read about yourself in the press, you think, well, where on earth did they get that piece of garbage from? It's what can I say about that? I resent, if ever in print, it's called a failure as a production, because they never point out that it played for 8 weeks to completely sold-out houses, which doesn't often happen at the Olivier Theatre, which seats 1,100 people at every performance, and we did 8 shows a week. So it's hard to, you've got to re-evaluate the word failure on that level. Plus the letters that one had from people saying, I don't understand what they were talking about.
The critics, that is.
Who, I have to say in all honesty, I don't read. You see, most of the time these days critics tend to write about they write about how actors do something. They don't very often write about what actors are doing. And conscious choices are involved. It's not an accident. It's not like we're getting it wrong. It's actually a choice. And
people suggested, though, there was an argument that you were unhappy about the way...
No, it's complete rubbish.
...produced.
Total rubbish. I read stuff after we'd opened about how Helen Mirren and I weren't getting on. I have never been closer to an actress on stage than I was in that production. And off stage, the greatest of friends. It was absolute rubbish that people wanted to create some kind of furore off stage as well as on. But in terms of the production, I mean, I don't know how much people know the play, but we're talking about two leaders of the world, and at a certain point in their lives, I was playing somebody who was basically an alcoholic. And I think people got very upset that they weren't seeing a great hero.
You don't talk much about the theory of acting, but there was one point where you were asked about it, and you said, the camera likes you if it can see you thinking, and most importantly, listening. Which is perhaps a strange thing for an actor to say, because most people would think you were judged on what you said, rather than...
Yes, but you only speak as a human being in life, and therefore, if you're trying to reproduce life on stage, and whenever I've talked to students, or indeed worked with young actors when I was directing The Winter Guest as a movie, particularly, I have an absolute mantra, which is that you only speak because you wish to respond to something you've heard. So the notion of an actor going away and looking at a speech they have in their bedroom alone at night is a complete nonsense to me. What you have to say is completely incidental. All one wants to see from an actor, to me, is the intensity and accuracy of their listening, and then what you have to say will become automatic. And then it will be free and alive, and then you can work on it and shape it and talk about it. But the basic kind of engine to it is how accurate is your listening, and how alive are you to your fellow actors, and how accurate is your response, and how bold.
You mentioned The Winter Guest, which started out as a play, and then you co-wrote the screenplay for that. This was...
Ish. I mean, it's a kind of slightly inaccurate credit. I mean, every word of that screenplay is Sharma MacDonald's, but I was very much involved in the restructuring of it.
As the director, and this was your
so
debut.
It became a kind of writing credit.
You learned a lot about acting from being a director?
Well, we learned, all of us, I would say, learnt most from the two 12-year-olds.
Why?
It's like when you're a child, you know that moment when when you paint a landscape as a child, and when you're maybe under 7 or something, the sky is just a blue stripe across the top of the paper. And then there's that somewhat disappointing moment when the teacher tells you that the sky actually comes down in amongst all the branches, and it's like life changes at that moment. It gets much more complicated and a little bit more boring. It's rather tedious to fill in the branches.
You're a pretty dreamy child yourself. weren't you?
So they say, yes, yes. Head in the clouds and off dreaming. But anyway, these boys knew nothing else but to listen to each other.
And you had a lot of support from your mother, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that I had a mother and a family who basically said, whatever makes you happy. Because it must seem a bit odd if a son says, I'm going to give up a career as a graphic designer and go back to being a student and go to drama school.
Your father died when you were very young, didn't he?
Yeah, when I was 8.
Which was a huge scar. You've talked about that quite a lot. Doesn't go away, really, does it?
Well, it doesn't, because, you know, I mean, I come from a working class family where you perhaps these days you're allowed to participate in events like that, and in the past I think one gets somewhat annexed from your feelings, you know.
You mean participate in the death? I mean, you didn't go to the funeral, for instance.
We didn't go to his funeral because, well, I actually think now that my mother was so distraught that she couldn't have coped with having her children there as well. But it was a strange thing not to be there. And it's a difficult thing. It's not explained to you why you're not there. But, you know, that was then when there was a kind of seen and not heard ethic, I suppose.
Quite political, this person.
Well, I grew up. One of the images of my childhood that I'll never forget is every time there was an election was my parents, including my father, but particularly my mother, standing on a chair, pinning her, or sticking her yellow, they were then yellow and black, a square turned that way around, vote Labour. Stickers in the window.
They talked of you as a candidate a couple of years back.
More rubbish.
Nobody ever came to you? Nobody ever suggested it?
I think they tried it on because somewhere in a press office somewhere they thought they're not going to let Portillo have all the publicity without any challenge, so what can we do? I know, let's sling an actor up against him.
People always ask actors what part they want to play, but there was one politician in the Labour Party, Peter Mandelson, who says he wants you to play him. If there's ever a film made of him. How do you feel about that?
Depends on the script, I suppose. I mean, it's difficult playing real people. I've done that a few times, and or people who have lived, as it were, you know, what with De Valera and Rasputin. And you have very particular luggage on your back when you do that, and you become very protective of those people. You know, Neil Jordan said to me when I started doing the research on De Valera for Michael Collins, he said, "So do you hate him yet?" Before we started, and that made me put on such a pair of boxing gloves, because you can't judge your characters. That's the last thing you can ever do. You've got to go in there as in a kind of, you know, informed but innocent.
Alan Rickman, we'll watch with interest. Will you put the gloves on for next time? Thanks very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Thank you.